What do you say, everybody? With Chris Daughtry behind the scenes and Trey Annity, I'm Mick Gillispie. It's time for our college football playoff ranking show. We are paying close attention to ESPN, which, by the way, has a basketball game that is coming down to the wire. So we got a little extra time tonight before we find out what the official college football playoff rankings are. We expect Alabama to be second or third. That could change from second a week ago after the way that Ohio State played. But look, before we get into anything else, let me ask you guys all to like and subscribe to Bama Insider YouTube channel. We appreciate you all being here. Hit the bell and know that when things are going on in the world of Alabama athletics, we have you covered. What's up, Trey?
What's going on, Mick? Great to be back this week. And like you said, we got basketball wrapping up here, but excited for these playoffs again. And guys, like Mick said, Alabama might not be number 2 again this week, but hey, it doesn't really matter. They are going to be in the SEC title, so they're going to have that chance against Georgia, but another great week. Excited to talk about it. How are you doing, Mick?
Yeah, look, I'm doing well. I guess before we get into anything else, I have to say condolences to Cecil Hurt's family. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the longtime Tuscaloosa news writer following Alabama and Cecil Hurts. I mean, look, Cecil's been there from way before me. I came to Alabama as a student. I was on the college radio station. We won a bunch of national awards. It was just really a fantastic time. And we always admired Cecil. I mean, we were doing media. We wanted to be like Cecil Hurt. I mean, he was the guy that covered Alabama. I got a job at the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and I started doing baseball. Was Chris Stewart's partner. Jim Wells called and personally asked me. He was the baseball coach. And that was such a huge thrill to me because, you know, when I was a student, Jim was the head coach, and he took Alabama to the World Series a bunch of times. And I knew that I must be doing a pretty good job when Cecil used to come in the booth and sit in there with us. And my wife was in here with me earlier tonight when we found out that, you know, we lost Cecil, and we both kind of reflected on how cool it was when he would just come in, pull up a chair and sit there and listen to our broadcast of Alabama baseball, you know. And sometimes Chris would be off doing other stuff, you know, basketball and, you know, and all the other things that he had. And sometimes he'd be there with me, and which was always awesome. But it was just really cool to have that audience, the Cecil Hurt audience. And once in a while, he'd write my name into the baseball stories that he would write. 2010, Alabama got to a super regional. We beat Georgia Tech in the regional, and I got to call the games on that. So I was just so heartbroken to hear that he was dealing with some health issues. And I just send my prayers and, you know, obviously my thoughts to his family and everyone that loved him, because I'm a person that loved him too. And this is just so sad.
I mean, really well said there, Mick. And like you said, I mean, this is completely devastating news. There's no, you know, legacy that I think will ever match that of Cecil Hurt, and just the amount of people that he touched in this community. We got to school here at different times, you and I, but we were both, you know, severely affected.
Not too far different, right?
Not too far.
Maybe 20 years, right?
You, me, and a lot of young journalists, you know, very affected by Cecil Hurt and his influence. You know, unbelievably devastating loss for this community. And like you said, condolences to the Hurt family. You know, this one is super tough.
Yeah. So we're thinking about Cecil tonight, and, you know, everyone in the Tuscaloosa News family as well. So we're all with you, and our heart goes out to you. Well, let's talk about Alabama football. We have the college football playoff ranking show tonight. You and I both have made our list of where we think everyone is going to be. Let's just go ahead and get into that, because what I've known about ESPN is that they drop their top list pretty fast, right? So what we'll do is Trey and I are going to give you our lists, and then as they start announcing where everyone is on the list, Chris will scroll that across the bottom of the screen. And it's obviously it's Iron Bowl week. Alabama needs to win to stay in the hunt for a spot in the college football playoff. So throw it up there. This is my list right here. This is where I think that the teams are going to be ranked this week. Trey, I'm going to just go ahead and run it down for you, and then I'll let you do your thing too. Georgia's going to be number 1. I just have a feeling that the committee is going to jump Ohio State over Alabama. It doesn't matter, though. Look, Alabama's got a matchup with Georgia dead ahead, so it really doesn't matter where they have them ranked. But the Crimson Tide probably will be number 3. And then Cincinnati, number 4, undefeated. They took care of SMU this week in pretty handy fashion. Keep an eye on Michigan. Look, they play Ohio State this week. So one of these two teams are going to be eliminated. If Michigan wins that game, they're going to bounce ahead. I don't think they're going to win, but they could. Oklahoma State plays Oklahoma. Both of them are going in with 1 win. The winner of that game is going to be in the mix. And if it's Oklahoma, they're not too far out of it right now. You also have Notre Dame kind of sniffing in there as well. But the good news for Alabama is that this is a year where a 2-loss Alabama team, if the second loss comes to Georgia in a really close game, could still sneak in to the playoffs.
No doubt about it. And, this is going to sound crazy what I'm about to say, but this upcoming game against Auburn really doesn't matter at all in either direction. I personally believe if Alabama goes out, they can lose to Auburn. If they beat Georgia in the SEC title, lost to Auburn or not, get that win, they're going to make the playoff either way. It's a hot take, but that's where I'm at right now. I really think that, Alabama, they just have to win that SEC title game at this point. Like you said, Mick, Alabama's probably not going to be number 2 tonight. Ohio State had an unbelievable performance this past weekend, but that might not matter because they will have that SEC title game. And I'll get to my picks here real quick as we're already on to number 16 there in Clemson, sneaking back into the rankings this weekend at number 23. Interested to see that. But I'll get to mine here real quick as well.
Here we go.
There it is. We got Georgia at number 1. Our rankings look pretty similar here, our picks at least. Ohio State at number 2, Alabama 3, Cincinnati 4. And then I got Michigan at 5. I got Notre Dame sneaking in at number 6 this week. They've looked really good since that loss to Cincinnati. Had another dominant win. I don't know. I see this group kind of hanging around in the mix. I don't see them making the playoff without a conference title game, but I don't know. I think Notre Dame will sneak into this thing. You're at least the top 6 at some point here, but that's what I got. I think Georgia is still the most dominant team in the country. And like you said, Cincinnati has done enough to earn it at this point. I mean, we're still doubtful. I think everybody is still doubtful on, what a group of 5 team can do in the playoff, but they've earned it to at least be in that conversation at this point.
Right. Well, the good thing for Notre Dame is that Cincinnati hasn't lost, and that's the only defeat that they have this year. And all of a sudden, everything's starting to kind of, pan out where you really look. The fact that Michigan and Ohio State play and Georgia and Alabama play definitely works to Notre Dame's favorite.
Yeah. No doubt about it. And, somebody in the comments here saying Alabama can't beat Auburn, they won't beat Georgia. I agree with that completely. But, this is a really odd year. And let's say they do, I think they still get in. But, maybe it comes down to that Notre Dame-Alabama decision. Do you take a 1-loss Notre Dame over a 2-loss Alabama? Do you take a 1-loss Notre Dame over an undefeated Cincinnati? Have they gotten that much better? I know Cincinnati has the head-to-head there, but I know the committee is still super doubtful on this team. And if Michigan does win this game on Saturday, what number do they slot in, at? Because if Alabama does beat Georgia, we could see maybe Michigan, Georgia in the first round, and Alabama would then get to play Cincinnati. So, I think the seeding of all of this is a little bit more interesting at this point in the season, as it tends to get the closer we get to the playoff. But, a lot has to happen still, and we could be looking at a completely different ranking a week from now.
Well, I think that what it's come down to, though, with 4 different teams is that that Georgia's getting in. They're not going to lose to Georgia Tech. Even if they lose to Alabama, they're in. They're kind of in that same spot that Notre Dame was in last year, where they knew that if they lost to Clemson, they were still going to be in, and they were, right? Ohio State, Michigan play each other. That's going to eliminate one of them, as I mentioned before. Alabama loses to Georgia. There's a good chance that they're out, although they might not be. If Alabama could get in with 2 losses, they need Cincinnati to lose. Notre Dame's probably not going to lose. Like they haven't played a tough schedule, but they've gotten better as the season's gone on. And then you got to keep an eye out on the winner of Oklahoma State, right? If it's Oklahoma State, do they go on? Do they have a championship game in the Big 12? I know they didn't. Maybe they do now. I think they do now, right? So some things can happen, but I see Chris is kind of kept us up to date with the rankings. And honestly, besides the top 6 or 7. I mean, I don't even think at this point it even matters anymore. Although if Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State, although they haven't gotten a lot of respect, they could possibly slide in there. I mean, they would have to have a lot of help.
They could. That's an interesting one. And Oklahoma actually coming up on screen now at number 10. I believe that's up 3 rankings from last week. But I just don't see it. I think Oklahoma did, they shot themselves too much in the foot throughout this season. And, it's not to say that Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley have found a way to kind of rejuvenate this team after this first few weeks. They have. They've looked a little bit better as the season's gone on, but then they regressed a little bit. And, at this point, 10-1, they will play Oklahoma State. And I guess, we're waiting on that ranking here, as well as Ole Miss all the way up to number 9. I just don't think that that's going to be enough for this Oklahoma team. This is a really, really weird season. There is going to be some craziness that happens in this rivalry week that will set some teams up, but I don't think Oklahoma is going to be one of those teams. I think you put in a 1-loss Notre Dame before you put in a 1-loss Oklahoma at this point.
Ole Miss, interesting to me. Lane Kiffin is being talked about at a lot of different coaching vacancies. Alabama fans remember when this happened and he was Alabama's offensive coordinator, shut it down, packed it up to the point where one of the rare times ever Alabama and Nick Saban got rid of a coach during the season. And I think it cost Alabama that national championship game against Clemson the second time when they were in Tampa, not having him there. But the game plan and his lack of focus against Washington led into that. So I'm looking at this game against Mississippi State and saying, look, if this guy's going to fly the coop again, which is possible, I wonder if he's going to be as prepared as he was for Washington. Although Alabama did win the game, it was like their worst offensive game plan they had that season. Just something to think about, and especially with those of you that like to put money down.
Yeah. How crazy would that be? How good of a feeling would that be this season to know that you're firing your offensive coordinator because he's not focused enough when you're headed to the national title? That
right.
If we get to that point, I think Alabama is going to be doing pretty good this season. But it's weird, and Ole Miss continues to get better as the season goes on. We've seen them kind of play a little bit more together, and that Egg Bowl, anything crazy could happen. Hopefully nobody raises their leg on a fake fire hydrant like we saw last year.
One of the all-time great plays ever.
Great celebrations, if nothing else there. But, I think this could be another statement win for that program. And next season, this Ole Miss team is still going to have a lot of firepower on offense. No Matt Corral, but this defense is going to be a lot better too. And I think that could be a team in the West you really want to keep your eye on. The West next season in general, and I won't get too far off track here, it's just going to be so crazy. But, I think this season for Alabama is continuing to get these youngsters involved in the scheme, figure some things out, and, get prepared for next season. Try to win this year. Put your best foot forward. Try to go beat Auburn. Try to go beat Georgia. Try to go beat your playoff opponent. Try to go win the national title. But, next season I think could really be when we see Alabama look like that old Alabama, when they're having to fire an offensive coordinator for not having enough focus.
Oklahoma State at number 7 does not totally surprise me. But they're right in the picture now, and it's because they have the game against Oklahoma. They get that win, and then the conference championship game, and the fact that a lot of teams ahead of them are going to play each other. So, I mean, just kind of looking at things the way that they've unfolded so far, any surprises for you so far, Trey?
Not to this point, to be honest. This is kind of where I saw it. It's interesting to think that there's now 3 Big 12 teams in the top 10. Obviously none in the top 5, but, really a conference that's had its up and downs this season. And, I think this next 6 is what I'm super interested to see. We know who's going to be number 1, but this 2-3 is going to get kind of dicey here. I really think Ohio State did enough this past week. And it's not to say Alabama, hasn't still looked like the second best team in the country, but the committee understands the seeding for teams that control their own destiny doesn't matter at all. For Georgia, it doesn't matter, obviously, as they're announced as the number 1 team in the country here still. But for Alabama, it doesn't matter either. You win these next 2 games, you're in regardless. It doesn't matter if you're number 3 going into Auburn weekend, or if you're number 4, you're number 10. Alabama controls their own destiny. That's the most important thing. Is Ohio State now is listed at number 2. A little bit surprising there, but I think that's what we had.
Yeah, look, we both kind of knew that was what the committee was going to do. They were going to push, Ohio State to number 2. They had the convincing win against Michigan State, but really it doesn't matter. I mean, like the fact that Alabama has to play Georgia. If Alabama beats Auburn and beats Georgia, they will be the number 1 seed going into the college football playoff. Just remember I said that. So for Alabama, it may be all or nothing. I mean, maybe you're either going to be number 1 or you're not going to be in there. It just depends on how things unfold. I think for the Crimson Tide, though, they could use some help. It would be great to see Notre Dame get upset. I don't know that that's going to happen. Cincinnati lose. I think that could very well happen. I thought that would happen against SMU. Look for Houston to beat them. I think Cincinnati has been begging for a loss, although last week they played their best game. And then you got, really the rest of the field just all kind of standing back going, hey, maybe somebody else will upset somebody else. But, Ohio State and Michigan play, and that'll eliminate one of those teams. But it'll also put the other team right square in the middle of this.
Yeah, it really will. And, this is what I love so much about Rivalry Weekend, because a lot of the times these games determine, who's going to a conference title, or in this case, who's going to make the playoff or not. And, Ohio State, since that loss to Oregon, has done a lot. They've looked a lot better. Obviously, CJ Stroud has figured it out. So, a 2-loss Ohio State versus a 2-loss Bama, if a lot of other crazy stuff goes down and it comes to that, that's going to be a really interesting decision for this playoff committee to make. I don't see this Ohio State team missing the playoff after these last 3 weeks. I mean, they have dominated. I think they're going to beat Michigan on Saturday and, just kind of cruise into it at this point. But, it could get really crazy if Michigan finds a way to win that game. I think that's probably the one game that affects more than anything this weekend.
Well, we're waiting right now to see if Cincinnati's going to be number 4. I think they will be number 4. I think they're going to slot up to number 4. The win against SMU definitely helps them out a lot. And this was a team that played, yep, there they go. They're in the 4th spot. This is a team that played Georgia last year in their bowl game as tough as anyone. I mean, like they came down to the very end and Georgia had to come from behind to beat them, and they haven't lost since.
That's true. That's crazy to think about, that this team has, has really won probably, I guess, 24, just going back to last season, 23 out of 24 games. And, continuing into this playoff run, here's try to get a playoff graphic updated. My laptop's kind of losing its mind over here on me. But, it's just going to be so interesting to watch that Georgia-Cincinnati game, if that's the case, because it will be personal for Georgia's Michigan at 5, now Notre Dame coming in at number 6. But Georgia, is going to take this game super personally, I think. And, that team's a lot better than it was last year, just a lot more focused than it was last year. I still don't know if Cincinnati's going to be the 4th seed. I would imagine that, they are. It would take a lot for them to slide up any further than they're at right now. But, that game is going to be a really fun playoff game, even though it is a group of 5 and a power 5. That game, I think, is going to have a lot of eyeballs on it if it were the case there. But, looking at this top 25 now, looking at this top 6, I think it's, relatively chalky, pretty much what we expected. And, for Alabama fans that are worrying, they're seeing Ohio State at number 2 and Alabama now at number 3. It's just not a big deal at all. If Alabama wins, they're in. If they don't, they won't. Simple as that.
I think the committee likes to do stuff like this too, where it's like, hey, you know what? We're going to go ahead and jump them for this team. They've been playing, better football. Ohio State played a Michigan State team that had the worst pass defense in their league. And look, I respect Mel Tucker. I mean, his time at Alabama. Look, I know he's a good coach, but that secondary was terrible, and Ohio State took advantage of him. The contract extension talks didn't help out a lot, and Ohio State right now has peaked. Remember me saying that. They have peaked. Wow. They play Michigan this week. I don't know that Michigan can beat them, but I think they'd have a tough time against Alabama or Georgia moving forward. And the Cincinnati, to me, of this group is just such a wild card. I mean, talent-wise, they can't hang on the same field as the rest of these teams. But you know what? They believe, and they have a really winning culture with Coach Fickle, like what he's doing. Maybe this is his last run there. I mean, maybe not. I don't know. I mean, they are going to the Big 12, so they'll be in the Power 5. But it's like they've caught lightning in a bottle. And just the way that everything's kind of lined up for them, here they are again. But this year, the numbers work for a playoff appearance if they stay undefeated. So that's what they have to do. Michigan's in if they beat Ohio State. Look, I mean, it's the same thing Alabama has with Georgia. And then there's Notre Dame. And to me, Notre Dame is the king of the backdoor slips because I don't think they're even close to being as good as any of the other teams up there. Cincinnati already whooped them. And people were like, well, if they played again, I don't know. Look, Cincinnati dominated them on their home field. So Cincinnati's clearly better. And Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, and I would probably say Michigan, but not with as much confidence. The three ahead of them would probably crush them. So, but that doesn't mean that Notre Dame's not going to make it. Brian Kelly is just a really good coach. And when you look at the fact that he hardly ever loses games, Notre Dame has just been the model of consistency. They've been kind of like that slow tortoise that's just continued to walk. And now you look at it, and I think they're in great position to make the playoff.
They are. I mean, I think Memphis or Houston, rather, that Cincinnati is going to have to deal with in their conference title could be a pretty tough opponent for that team. I'm not penciling in Cincinnati or not, writing them in with pen quite yet. I'm going to pencil them in for now. And just the overall landscape. It's so crazy to think about how college football is nowadays. I mean, the fact that Cincinnati can compete for the college football playoff, UCF a few years ago, a lot of these group of fives, some of the upsets that we see on a weekly basis, it just, is really a telltale sign of where college football has gone. And I think it's only going to continue to go that way. I think Cincinnati is just the first, of maybe group of five schools that can make a run at this thing in the future. And you get the right athletes, you get the Desmond Ritters, you get the Jerome Fords, you're going to put yourself in position to make the playoff. Now, how will they do? If they do make the playoff is the question. I was talking about it with a buddy last night. Cincinnati has a lot of pressure if they make the playoff because this is kind of the precedent setter for this whole thing. The committee watches Cincinnati make the playoff and get absolutely dominated. Maybe they think twice in the future about putting a group of five team in. If they go on and win their playoff game, we could see just about anybody making the playoff in the future. So I think this game, whoever they play, if they do make the playoff, is going to be one of the biggest or most important college football games for the overall landscape of the game in a long time.
Let's just say that if Alabama loses to Georgia and Michigan loses to Ohio State, so we'll just go ahead and take Alabama and Michigan out of this. How's this going to unfold for the playoff picture? And I'm talking about, Cincinnati has their game against Houston. I think they're going to lose it, but let's just, just for this show, we'll just pretend that they win. Then if Oklahoma State wins, I think they jump Notre Dame. And all of a sudden you're looking at Georgia, Ohio State, Cincinnati, and Oklahoma State.
What a wild
How about that?
That would be. I mean, that's, it would certainly, it would be the least chalky playoff I think we could draw up for this thing. If Oklahoma State wins their next two games, if they beat Oklahoma and win their conference championship, I could see them hopping Notre Dame. I don't think the committee is putting Notre Dame at 6 as a sign of, well, hey, we really believe in Notre Dame and, they're still right there to make the playoff. I think this is just kind of a placeholder, if nothing else, because Oklahoma State still has the higher ceiling. They still have more opportunity. Notre Dame, can play this last week out, look dominant. They can play a great game, but they don't have a conference title to get that extra little
right.
The season. And, they're not playing a team that was in the top 4 to start it. That's still in the top 10 in Oklahoma. They're not going to have that chance that Oklahoma State's going to have. Will the committee, say that's enough? Maybe it comes down to the point spread, at the end of the game there. That could be the case. But, overall, I think the committee is really just going to take their time with this decision. And I think they're going to give Cincinnati the benefit of the doubt here. A loss to Houston obviously eliminates them. But, this team in the 4th spot right now, I think they're a lock for it. After that, if Michigan and Alabama are gone, it will come down to Notre Dame and Oklahoma State. Seeding wise, I think you probably keep Cincinnati below either of those two schools. I think if Oklahoma State does enough, you probably bump them to 3 because you want to see that Georgia-Cincinnati rematch in the first round. And ultimately, you don't want Georgia playing Cincinnati in the national title. So I think they're going to do whatever it takes to keep Cincinnati at 4 if Alabama and Michigan were, both to lose, or if Ohio State is knocked out. But, the seeding is going to get really, really interesting here. Yeah,
Alabama holds their destiny in their hands, though. Look, all they got to do is beat 2 of their biggest rivals. They got to take care of Auburn this week in the Iron Bowl on the road, which they've lost the last 2 games down at Jordan-Hare. So, this year sets up for a season where Alabama, you think they're a 19-point favorite or plus, so they should win that one. And then they'll be an underdog against Georgia in Atlanta. But Alabama's beaten Georgia the last few times, including last year in the SEC championship game and the national championship game. As a matter of fact, it's been a long time since Georgia has beaten Alabama. And for the Dogs to win their title, they're going to have to get through the Crimson Tide one way or the other. So, I mean, we've kind of debated that all week, how it's going to end up unfolding. But this is a really fun race just because, of the 7 or 8 teams that have a chance to make it right now, the only team that I'm sure is going to be there is Georgia.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, they're a lock. I don't think they're going to lose to Georgia Tech this week. If they lose to Georgia Tech, maybe they don't make the playoff for the loss to Bama there. But Georgia is going to make the playoff this season. And after that, it really is going to just be a race to the finish here. And, I'll make a quick comment on Georgia, Alabama, because it's the hot topic of the week. But I don't want to rule this game out quite yet. Alabama, we talked about it on Saturday. A caller called and said, we've seen Alabama's offense look really good. We've seen Alabama's defense look really good at times this year. Hey, what if they click all at the same time and, they just come out and play a really good game? I don't think leading up to Texas A&M, anybody would have given Texas A&M a shot to win that game, or, anybody that wears crimson and white. But, Texas A&M won that game. Why can't Alabama go out and put this thing together, go win a game? I just don't want to be the guy to put a nail in that coffin quite yet. Georgia is unbelievably talented. That's one of the best defenses in the history of this game. Their offense has been great. Their running back room is so deep, but Alabama's got 5 stars everywhere. And guess what? They got the greatest coach in the history of the game. I'll leave it at that. We got a lot to talk about next week leading up to that game, so I'll save some of that. But
that's right. Well, that's right. And I guess we're kind of to that point now where it's time to pretty much wrap this thing up. But I want to remind everybody that tomorrow night it'll be this news to me, but is this going to be Chris's debut?
It is.
Chris Daughtry and Trey Yannity on the score prediction contest.
Oh, yeah. Chris is getting behind the microphone. We're going to get camera on him. He is making his debut tomorrow night. So, guys, come and show your support here. We're going to have a lot of fun. And I don't know if you saw, Mick, but we got a little bracket going right now between our score pickers. So I got to take a look and finalize it tomorrow. But I believe we have the round of 8 coming up here to start out this week. So we got to keep that up into Auburn. But overall, it's going to be a really great week on BamaInsider.com. And, just a lot of coverage coming into Auburn.
That's right. Friday night, we will have the Bama Insider Tailgate Show, 6 to 8. That airs on radio on Saturday, but you guys are a part of our in-video audience as we record that thing right here each and every week. All right, Trey, anything else before we wrap it up tonight?
Just, again, condolences to the Hurt family and, everybody affected by that loss. So tragic. And, everybody have a happy Thanksgiving as well. We'll talk to you tomorrow night, but if I don't see you guys on that show, please enjoy some turkey for me.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked about Cecil at the beginning of the show and, just kind of wrap it up again, just thinking about Cecil Hurt and his family and what he's meant to Alabama, covering the Crimson Tide, doing it with integrity and objectiveness through the good times and the bad times, from Bear Bryant through Nick Saban. And there were a lot of down times and a lot of up times, but we just had so much respect for him. I mean, like I said before, I remember him as a student at Alabama, and just how much I admired him and how much he's going to be missed. All right, so for Trey Yannity and Chris Daughtry, I'm Mick Gillispie. Again, guys, thank you for watching. We'll be back next Tuesday when the college football playoff ratings are updated, and we hope that you'll join us right here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel. Good night.